Okay, today in CIST 1530, Chapter 3, we're going to look at working with selections. So there's a couple things we're going to look at in this lesson. We're going to look at making selections, different types of selection tools. We're going to look at the how to transform selections, distinguish between pixels within a selection and the selection itself. So we're going to look at the limitations of a selection tool as well as we go through this lesson. The first thing we're going to look at is our selection tools options we have. Okay, we have multiple selection tool options. We have our rectangular marquee tool that allows us to make a selection. We also have our elliptical marquee tool, which is going to allow us to make a selection for elliptical shapes. Some of these we have in here is our single row marquee tool, which allows us to select a single row. And we have our single column, which allows us to select a single column of pixels. Now I want to bring your attention up to the keyword of select here on our option bar. Okay, in here we do have some options. In here we can select all, so we're selecting all the pixels in the image. We can also deselect. So deselect is going to turn our selections off. We also have some other ones we'll look at, like the inverse. Reselect is just going to reselect our last selection. Underneath this, we will have our freehand selections. This is where we'll find our lasso tool, our polygonal lasso tool, and our magnetic lasso tool. It's a lasso tool. It's a freehand selection that we can use to select around an area. So with the lasso tool, we can draw an area, and we make sure that we do, when we use this, that we do have this closed around the area we want it selected. Okay, so if I'm wanting to select this image here, and I'm drawing with the lasso, if I go over into this section that's labeled A and let go, you'll see that I do make my selection here as well. So everything that's inside of these dotted lines are selected. So when you're using these freehand tools, you want to make sure that you close your loop with just the area that you want selected. The polygonal lasso tool, this sets anchor points that when we click, we can set anchor points so that we can make selections. And so everything that's inside of this will be selected, because it's going to make anchor points and straight line selections. Magnetic lasso tool is going to kind of work as kind of an in-between both of those. It does have the anchor points. It is freehand. As you can see, I can make odd shapes with this tool. One thing I want to point out with the magnetic lasso tool is that you do have to manually close this loop. For example, if I'm selecting this sand dollar, when I click and drag around, you'll see the anchor points are going to be placed automatically. But when I get to this point, you'll see this little circle that's appeared at the edge of my tool. Now that's to know that that edge, that selection has been completed. I need to click, and then it will close the loop. Okay, I do have also edge-based selections. which allows me to have the object selection tool, the quick selection tool, and the magic wand. Quick selection tool, this is going to quickly paint a selection. So I've chosen my selection area. It is thinking, and now it's made the selection that I've chosen. Underneath this is our quick selection tool. Quick selection tool is going to allow me to kind of paint over this area. So as I'm clicking and dragging my mouse, you'll see that it is selecting areas. It actually jumped over this object selection tool. I was talking about the quick selection when I had the object selection tool selected. What this does, it identifies and selects a subject within the appropriate area. So I define my area, and then here it's going to look and choose the subject of what I am wanting to select. Underneath this is the magic wand tool, and it's going to select the image based on the similarity of the pixel colors. So if I click this, you'll see that it's selected everything here but the silver dollar. So I've selected just the red area here. I do want to zoom in on this and see when you're selecting items with the magic wand tool, you'll see that this areas are not being selected. Okay, so the similarities of those colors are just a little bit out of the range. I can adjust the tolerance so that I have that where it selects a little different. So I can change the tolerance. We'll change what's actually selected with the magic wand tool. We'll deselect everything. I'm going to zoom back out to fit the screen. Also in this lesson, we'll talk about cloud documents. The cloud documents is saving your images on the web. Adobe has gotten more and more into using mobile apps, mobile devices. So they've worked with changing the saving options and provide mobile apps so they can integrate with the desktop applications. And this is worked through the Creative Cloud. So Photoshop, when we're talking about cloud documents, for Photoshop, this is going to be the default file format for if you're working on an iPad. And if you go to the Save As, it is integrated in here as well to save to cloud documents. So you can save to your cloud once again, though, I recommend you saving these documents to your personal computer, not to the cloud, since you will have to submit these assignments. All right, so we're making a selection. This moving a selection is going to be different than moving the pixels. So I'm going to use the marquee tool. You see, this is moving my pixels. in this section. I'm moving the selection I've made. And deselect that. I'm actually going to undo this. Put that back to where it was at. Now, when we're moving our selections, now we're going to look about doing the transform tools. To use this, we first need to make a selection. So I'm going to make a selection here. You see, this is the difference between moving the selection versus moving the pixels. So if I'm going to use the transformation tools, you'll see under the edit, and you come down to, you'll see free transform and transforms. When I have a selection made or an image selected, you create a layer from this. Okay, so now that I have a layer selected, I can use these transform tools. Free transform is just going to give me like a freehand. Under the transform, I do have the options to scale, so I can resize, I can rotate an image, I can skew it, distort it, change the perspective, I can warp it, I can rotate the image 180 degrees, I can flip it clockwise, or counterclockwise. Also, I can flip it horizontal or vertical. We're going to start out looking at the free transform. Okay, you'll see this puts this bounding box around my image. Which allows me to go through these, and I can resize the image. Notice that it's going to scale proportionally. If you look at my mouse pointer now, you'll see it's got the kind of rounded arrows. This allows me to rotate my image, and it tells me the degree percentage I'm rotating. The side will allow me to adjust the image sideways in most cases. Once again, Photoshop has started locking the aspect ratio on these. You'll see at the option bars, you can have the X and Y axis, the height and width. That's how it is adjusted through being locked. When I have the lock turned off, you'll see that I can adjust the image independently. Going to the corner is still going to adjust these together. But when I go to one of the ones in the sides or the middle of the top, I can adjust the height and width of this independently of each other. You do have a commit button up here that will allow you to choose your commit, confirm your commit, or cancel. You do have different options in here as well, where you can use the free transform tool or the actual individual tools to change this. So if I want to make this 50% height, I can go in and specify the actual setting here and not use the bounding boxes on the side. Okay, I'm going to scale this image down a little bit just as we go through the rest of these. Okay, so free transform gives me kind of free reign as far as being able to perform transform commands. I can come in and specify which transform command I want to use. For example, if I only want to rotate, I can lock that in and choose the rotate command. Skew is going to let me stretch out the image, so I can skew the way it is presented. Distort is going to allow me to distort the way the image looks. You see, I can completely transform the way the image is viewed. Perspective is going to allow me to change the perspective of the image as well. And I can use this by using the bounding box. I can also adjust with the options at the top here. So for this week, you're going to start with your 03 start.psd. And I'm going to go back in my history, back to the beginning when I open this file up. When you work through this chapter, when you get to the section about using cloud documents, it's going to have you open up Bridge. And from there, it's going to have you save this as a cloud document. You will still need to save your document to be able to submit through Blackboard. As you do when you rename the file as 03working.psd. As I said, the Magic Wand tool allows you to select pixels that are similar in color. So what it's going to have you do is, in this assignment, you're going to select the Magic Wand tool, and you're going to be working with the silver dollar, or the sand dollar, excuse me. So when you select this, you want to change your tolerance value to 32. And then when you make the selection, it's going to select everything that's in the red. Now, a few minutes ago, we were talking about some of these options up here, and I said I was coming back to the inverse. Inverse is going to flip your selection. So currently, with my selection, if I move this selection, you'll see this, I'm only moving the red background. If I choose to inverse my selection, now I've selected everything else in my image other than that red background. And this is true for any of your selection tools. So inverse is going to take your selection and it's going to flip it. It's going to reverse what you have selected so that you have everything else selected but what you have chosen. The quick selection tool, once again, we'll go through this. And here you do have other options. We're going to enhance the edge. So it's going to look for the edge of this. It's going to create a better quality of the selection. So the edges are going to be really true to the object. This is something that is slower than using the Magic Wand, but your responses, your results are going to be better. So we're going to use our quick selection tool. In this case, because the difference in the color, it was a little bit easier to use. All right, so we're going to use the move tool and we're going to move this image. All right, so what we're going to be doing in this lesson is moving these images to the correct location. In this case, we're going to put it in the one that's labeled A. Now, once we have it there, we're going to go up to select and deselect our selection. Okay, we're going to look at the object selection, and we're going to use that with this piece of reef or coral. So in here, we're going to draw our selection. Let's see, it's made our selection here. So after we make selections, we'll go up and use the move tool to move this to the location of B. We'll deselect. Sometimes you might run into a selection that doesn't quite get everything. Or maybe not exactly what you're trying to select. So we're going to go up here to the elliptical marquee tool. And in here we're going to make our selection. So you see that I didn't quite select what I was aiming for. So in here I'm going to click in my selection. And so we're going to hold down the mouse button. And this is sometimes a tricky skill to master. So we're going to make our selection again. So holding down the mouse button, I'm going to reposition this. I'm going to hold down the space bar as I drag this. So we'll get this closely aligned to where we want it to. We can also come up to this area here and add to the selection. So now we're going to draw another marquee tool. You'll see that by using this, I can add to my selection. Same way if I get too much. So in this case, I've got too much of the selection. I can go up here and to remove from that selection. Now I'm going to zoom in on this as we do this. Okay, as you'll see that when I cross over my selected area, you'll see that I am now removing that from the selected area. Now in this situation, this selection tool may not be the best tool to use for this. So I may come in and use, say, the magnetic lasso tool to make my selection. Rather than using the elliptical. Once again, Photoshop's going to give you 1,000 different ways to accomplish one task. Right, so as you see, it's been a lot easier to select this with a magnetic lasso tool. And once again, you'll see that I've got some issues here in my selections. My selection is complete. Okay, so I do have some areas here that I don't want to select. I still could go up here and use my subtract from the selection. And in here, I'm going to go back through and choose the areas that I don't want selected. Now with the magnetic lasso tool, I want to make sure that I do close that loop. So I've got my starting area, and basically I'm making a selection of what to remove. The key to using selections is to find a selection that works the best for you. Okay, so now I've made my selection. And now I can place this in the correct spot, just going in C. And I'm going to deselect. So it's up to you of how you move your selections. Let's say I get this selection placed, and let me reselect it. And I decide I don't really like the way it's looking. I don't like the shells here. I want them on the other side. This is where my transform tools come in. So I can come in and now I can rotate this. So if I want to rotate it to where it's on the other side, I can. Just make sure that you have a selection made when you try to use the transform tools. You can also move using your arrow keys. You can see the images moving one pixel as I'm clicking my up and down or left and right arrow keys. This allows you to come in and better get your images placed how exactly you want them. Now you'll see that I still have some black that's up here. Okay, so in this situation, I may come in and use my transform tool to change the size. So I may do the scale. Once again, I'm going to zoom in on this as we transform. I'm going to go to the corner, and because I want the size of this image to stay proportional. And so now I'm happy with the placement of the image and that all the black is covered. So I'm going to deselect the image. Once again, the lasso tools. These are something you can use for freehand. So if I'm selecting this image here, I can make a quick selection of the image. I can still go in and subtract the areas that I don't want selected. You see I've messed up and I've now unselected this area here. So I can go back in and readjust this to add that back to the selected area. Keyword selection tools, find the ones you want to use that you fit your need, and find the ones that or use the ones you take your time using these. You can also copy a selection. So once I've made this selection, I can go up to Layer, and under the category of new or the selection of new, I do have the options here: layer via copy or cut. Okay, when I choose layer via copy, that is making a copy of what I have selected. So I've now made a copy of my selection. It leaves the original in the same location. If I choose layer via cut, that is going to make a new layer from my selection. So I'm going to choose something to make a quick selection here. So in here, if I go to layer and choose to make a new layer, And in that case, I made a layer of the copy. So going back to my original. So in here, if I make a layer from cut, when I move this, you'll see that it has removed it from my original image. Copy will leave the original image intact and create a new layer. Cut will cut it out of the original image and make a new layer. Okay, so also this week we're going to look at cropping. And we're going to pretend that we've got all of our items up here, and we're going to pretend that I actually use my selection tools correctly, and everything has been selected right, transformed correctly, and this is my completed image at the top. I need to discard all of this stuff at the bottom. So in this case, I would use my crop tool. So my crop tool, what this is going to allow me to do is remove let me choose something else here. Okay, the crop tool, as we'll see the animation of this, it's going to trim or expand the edges of an image. So you see you get these bounding boxes around the corners. Okay, that allows me to readjust the size of my image. You'll notice that it is being height and width both at the same time. And I hit the wrong key. Now, once you crop an image, you can still move your image in to get to the actual area if you wanted to just crop certain areas out. You do have some options up here as well, or you can change the different types of ratios, the inches. You can straighten an image this way. You have some different options to go through. In this option, you can choose to delete the cropped pixels. You can make it a content aware. So let's go back through this in here as well. So what you'll be doing in your assignment is we're going to select the crop tool. Notice that there are other tools underneath the crop tool we'll cover in later chapters. In this option, you're going to choose the ratio. Make sure that is selected. Make sure that the delete cropped pixels is selected. And you'll see that with the ratio selected, now we can choose this to move independently. So we're not using the height and the width and cropping this out. Now, once we've done this, we'll commit our crop. You see that our image has now been resized. Once you're through with this, you will save your assignment and submit it through Blackboard.